Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of Market Bites. And today we're going to focus purely on Nvidia. They've got their earnings coming out later tonight. It's the big one, it's the one you've all been waiting for. So we've got the dream team together one last time for the medium term. Leisure is heading off for a little bit before we get into Nvidia and all of that. And Nvidia, Neza, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, Sam. Thank you. Yeah, I'll be gone for a few months, but I'll be back in autumn probably. So I will definitely miss you guys. And it's bittersweet that this is a final episode for me for a while. But yeah, today we will cover NVIDIA, one of the most important events this week. We could say that it's almost as important as a Champions League finale on Saturday. Yeah, I'm keeping up with that, guys.
Yeah. Well, listen, you finally learned to get that football chat in, and we've got an Nvidia showstopper to wrap up the medium term as the big three. So it's great to have you on board for today. Josh, how are you? You're back from your holidays and your work. You've been living the dream, haven't you?
You can say so now. I'm a very hard worker, Sam. So it was a very busy time for me, but I also did get a few days off on the back end as well. So yeah, very fun time. Bit of R&R at the end of it. But yeah, I had spent some time in the UAE, which was pretty exciting. But yeah, it's sad to see Neza going at a time where I feel like she's flourishing in her football presence on this podcast. I think when she comes back, she will spend 3 months on the off market, right? We're, be pre-season by that point. You'll be learning the trade, coming back, and she's going to be flying in with some quality quotes by the time we get back. There'll be some. This actually might not be an investing podcast by the time Neza gets back. It might be purely football. So,
Fabrizio Romano, actually.
I will definitely listen to all the episodes, so I will keep up.
Good. We'll be sure to shout you out. But look, let's get into it then. As we said, we've got Nvidia, who are reporting their earnings after the market closed tonight. So we've got a few topics that we'll go through. First of all, we can have a quick look at just what's happened this year from a price action point of view. And I've got the chart up, which I can see, obviously, for those that are listening or watching on YouTube or the podcast, you won't be able to see the chart, but do check it out yourself. It's been a bit of a journey, it has to be said. I mean, we opened the year pretty much bang on all-time highs, to be honest, trading at 152 bucks, which is that sort of double top that we had from November and then the 8th of January. And you could be forgiven for thinking at that point we're just going to keep going higher. We're going to make a new all-time high, and then the market backs off a little bit. You'll remember DeepSeek, which sent market lower, albeit it recovered a little bit. Then tariffs came under the spotlight, that sent things down again. So at its worst, at the beginning of the year, 8th of Jan, to its low in April, it was down 44% or so, which is pretty remarkable when you think about just what kind of company this is. And since then, of course, if you time the absolute low, well, you're a genius, but you're also pretty happy right now to see it trading up 57, 60%, give or take. And it's knocking on the door at 135 bucks, which is quite a key resistance level. So we head into the report, in a pretty interesting spot. And I did a poll yesterday on the etoro platform where I asked people to let me know how they feel about sentiment. As I said, Neja and Josh and I are doing the podcast tomorrow, and 74% of 746 people are positive that it will finish for this week, negative 12% and flat 12% as well. So it's finally set, I would say, from a technical point of view. It's been on a bit of a journey to get to where it is today on the 28th of May. Before we go to Josh and ask what to expect from the report, when we think about Nvidia, Neja, what are we thinking about from sort of a competitor point of view? Because obviously some people will, be looking at Nvidia, but also when it comes to the report, they'll want to also compare it to competitors.
You know what? It's kind of funny to talk about NVIDIA and in the same sentence use the word competitor, because we saw that NVIDIA is kind of a top player in all this AI world. And as AI took off, Nvidia really became just a gold standard for everyone, for all these AI models. But yeah, competition is still here. And it is building up, I would say, because we can see other chip makers like AMD now releasing their own AI products, and those often come at lower prices. And also Nvidia's biggest customers like Amazon, Meta, Google, they don't want to rely just on Nvidia. And they started to build their own AI chips, which might not be that powerful, but they are just good enough for many tasks. But at the same time, I wouldn't say that Nvidia is in trouble for all of that. We can still see their earnings as macroeconomic event, maybe, because I also saw that they just made a very clever move, because they announced something like NVLink Fusion thing, and this is just a system that allows to use Nvidia chips with combination with other companies' chips. So this is something that wasn't possible before. And now customers can actually build systems based not just on Nvidia chips, but on many different chips. And basically they can mix and match. And I would say that this is a way for Nvidia to stay relevant no matter what competition is doing. Maybe they will sell less of their own chips, but they will stay in center of all of the AI infrastructure for years to come. So I think that while competition is real and growing, Nvidia is just adapting fast, and they have a strong brand, powerful chips, smart technology, and based on their earnings, we will see how all of this AI market is moving and growing.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see over the next sort of 6 months when you line up all those companies you mentioned and to see where they finish the year. Some of those companies have had good or better starts to the year than Nvidia. Some have had worse. I was actually at a dinner yesterday with people, and people were just talking about different trade ideas that they like, but also areas that they don't like. And one person, we'd gone round the table, and they go, "You know what? I've got another one for you." And we go, "Yeah, go on." And he goes, "Short Google." And we talked about that for a while. Whether that'll be right or not, I'm not sure. But I actually also saw, just before coming on the podcast, an investor who I follow quite closely on X talking about how AMD is his play, and he thinks that that's going to be, primed for a recovery, because it's still significantly down from its all-time high, AMD. But again, we have to wait and see to see how that goes in the near future. Joshy, let's get into the earnings report then. Comes out just after the market closes. So for those in the UK, just after 9 p.m. It's the last big one of the earnings season.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. Look, there's no stock, I think, that sets the tone for tech really like Nvidia anymore. I think that's probably the key point. And I think the whole basis of Nvidia's earnings is that it doesn't just give that read through on its earnings, and it isn't just about itself. It gives this entire read through on the whole AI revolution. That's why it's sort of so important. And if we go back to its Q4 earnings that came out earlier in the year, we listened to Jensen Huang, and when Jensen speaks, you listen. And he was essentially saying that demand for Blackwell chips had been amazing, and they were seeing billions of dollars worth of sales in the first quarter. So, investors are going to want to see that translated, within the next 24 hours in their earnings coming through. Since that call, though, Trump's tariffs, as we know, they've roiled markets. You went through the price action there a minute ago, Sam. We've obviously had that low of the price and then that recovery coming through. We are still a bit unsure, though, really how this sort of 90-day tariff pause is going to play out. Obviously with China and with obviously what we're seeing now recently with Europe. Therefore, commentary around those tariffs is going to be a big focal point. For those that maybe aren't aware, Nvidia has been hit with a $5.5 billion charge for exporting chips to China. That is going to show up in these results, but it's something we already know, so it's unlikely to move the dial too much from a market perspective as well. But I think really coming back to that, investors are going to want to hear how they're looking to navigate those exports to China. Are we seeing new chip variants? Could that offset some sales coming into the second half of the year? Or may we also get a little bit of commentary that while demand in China is maybe clouded by export restrictions, Are we seeing them sort of roll out the red carpet for the Middle East? That's sort of, fast becoming a new launch pad, I think, for AI and maybe for Nvidia's next phase of growth. We've just seen Trump there in the UAE, the UAE committing billions of dollars in capital, over the next decade towards AI. Trump sort of supporting a data center, one of the largest in the world to be built in Abu Dhabi. So plenty to watch from that regard. Whether we hear too much about it is yet to be seen. But that will be certainly interesting. The other side of that, I think there may be a bit of concern over this potential downturn, from this sort of tariff-related drama. But I think given what we've seen from those hyperscalers, right? If we think about big tech and what we've heard from them already, this quarter, they're allocating billions more dollars to AI, right? And I think that shows that demand is still high for Nvidia. That most of them increased their capex. So I think that concern over demand is unlikely to fall too heavily, at Nvidia's door. I think they've got Blackwell chips that are now in full production. The only other question mark that really comes, I think, for Nvidia is on, can they actually meet demand? Supply is usually the problem. So that's what we'll want to hear about as well. The other slight problem that came last quarter was margin guidance. And this essentially came from costs to actually get these new Blackwell chips off the ground and online and being ultimately shipped out to, big tech. That did dent margins, and they said it would, effectively hurt margins this quarter as well. But I think if we can hear commentary around improving margins moving into the second half of the year, I think that will come from a few things. One, because they've ramped it up already. Those costs, are likely to be offset already, probably due to pricing power. Right, as Neza said, they don't really have much competition, so they can ultimately charge what they want in this scenario. So I think if we can hear that, if we can hear improving margins, that should be a positive. From a numbers perspective, revenue around about $43 billion. Over half of that is expected to translate into net income at $23 billion as well. So just shows how, going back to pricing power, just shows how much money they can make. So as I say, big commentary around tariffs, big commentary around China, and commentary around improving margins. Those are going to be, I think, the three focal points here. And of course, that demand for those Blackwell chips as well.
So overall, we could say that expectations are still very high for the company, no matter what is happening on geopolitical side this year. Because we saw some turbulences for Nvidia already with DeepSeek, with all of it coming at once. So I am quite surprised that your survey, Sam, came out that positive, because nevertheless, expectations are high. Company is still proving that they are on top of the game, but still there are some risks that we should consider before just praising how everything is going well.
Yeah, I was surprised it was that positive as well. And I looked at the last set of earnings reports and then the 7-day reaction to them. And since the last three, so February, November, and August, the 7 days that followed, Nvidia was down 12%, 5%, and 19%. However, the three before that the two before that were positive, then you go negative, three before were positive. So it's, by the time you get back all the way to 2020, it seems like a 50-50 chance whether it's positive or negative 7 days back. Albeit the positive numbers have been pretty good when it does finish well. But yeah, I'm surprised maybe it was so positive. I'd be leaning towards it's going to be great, but it's not going to be amazing. Albeit I have no inside information, so that is just a gut feel, which when it comes to certain things like predicting sports results, that's always wrong. So do take that with a bit of a pinch of salt. But again, I was speaking with people yesterday, and we were asking what's the next event in markets that could actually move the needle, because it has actually felt in the last few trading days that we're just sort of following the path of least resistance. There isn't anything from a scheduled point of view. Now, you find on Friday you get the US and EU tariff update that gets then taken away 2 days later, but that's not scheduled. So it doesn't really feel like there's been a big event in recent times. So, you chuck in this report, if it's really, really bad, people maybe do start to worry about the broader market, but we can discuss that later on. Before we get into that, Josh, have you looked at the options market? Is that giving us any sort of indication for what could happen?
Yeah, and I think you went through a couple of those numbers there, Sam, a minute ago in terms of that reaction, sort of, aftermarket, right, and sort of following those results. I think it's worth noting that those last two results where we've seen the share price sort of tumble, after 7 days, they actually beat earnings expectations by more than 5% both times, right? So I think if we think back, one of the ones that really stands out to me to something similar was Palantir, that just reported this quarter. It was their best ever quarter. Again, valuation concerns, a lot going in there, but it was their best ever quarter. They raised guidance, but the market just ultimately wasn't satisfied and shares were trading at record high. They just wanted more. So I think that goes to show what weight that sort of this, this report actually has. And yeah, looking back at the options, pricing about a 6% one-day move either way. And when we think about the size of Nvidia, the size of this company, it's a pretty big move. And like you say, Sam, this has the option to, drive markets, ultimately, drive the NASDAQ, right? Because it has such a big weight on the market. So this could ultimately signal, I think there's three options here, right? And I mean, they're pretty obvious options, but I think it can, one, signal the green light that the AI revolution is still absolutely, rolling on. And I think that will be backed up by the fact that we actually had pretty decent earnings from the Magnificent Seven all in all. And S&P 500 earnings have actually been pretty good as well. Middle ground is that we just don't get a lot. It's a pretty great report, positive from a guidance perspective. It doesn't set the world alight, but actually the market's not too worried about it. Or, there's a bit of a miss there, more concerns over China, margins miss expectations, and the guidance is sort of pretty far off expectations. That's when we might see some broader weakness in the market as well. But I think, again, it shows the weight that goes on guidance when we spoke about the beats that came through and then the share price tumbles. So I think it shows, how important that we're going to have to listen to, Jensen Huang on the earnings call and actually look at those numbers that are coming through. But I think, as I say, a beat, a raise in both sales guidance and margins. I think margins is going to be the big one here. I think the rally's on, and I think it, drives the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ higher.
Yeah, it is all about the guidance, isn't it? Really is. And just some of the comments on the poll that I did yesterday, two contrasting ones that I picked out in response to whether they think at the end of the week Nvidia would be higher or lower. In my opinion, this is someone speaking now. In my honest opinion, or is it humble opinion? Let's go humble. Either way is a win. It goes massive again, or you buy in at a reasonable price point, as it will keep going north. Someone who's clearly a passionate long-term investor. By the way, if you ever are, a super long-term investor and the market does go low for whatever reason, you're okay with it, aren't you, to buy a little bit more? And then you've got someone else who goes, I've abandoned it for marathon and MicroStrategy. Thank God I did it. I will never buy Nvidia again, which I found quite funny. I don't know why they wanted to chuck in two unrelated companies there, but yeah, it made me smile. Of course, you don't have to be involved in Nvidia. You don't have to trade it. You don't have to buy it and hold it long term, but it is important for the broader market, Neja.
Yeah, it is. It is. Josh already mentioned how it can move the whole market, and we saw that before. And yeah, Nvidia earnings doesn't just move its own stock, but the whole market. But we are kind of used to that volatility already, aren't we? We can see the market move few percentages every day, up or down. But yeah, Nvidia earnings are one of those events that can potentially move the whole market. And we already saw majority, like I think 95% of all S&P 500 companies already reporting their earnings. So this is like a big finale, like as I said, Champions League finale match. So I think that those results will show us what is chip demand and also how strong is all this AI infrastructure. And yeah, as Josh said, if we can see that there is still confidence, that they improve their margins, that they have a better than expected guidance, we could see all of this tech market moving up. But if we see on the other side, margins that are not performing that well, this was a soft spot in last earnings, we could potentially see a negative impact on the whole tech industry. And we saw that before. For example, what was in May last year, so May 2024, we saw Nvidia shares going up, I think 9% after earnings, and that added more than $200 billion to market value, and it pushed all semiconductor industry up. But on the other hand, this year in February, we saw strong earnings, but shares declined by 9% due to those concerns over margins. So there is option to move either way, and yeah, it will impact the whole market.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just think it goes to show, like, I mean, you call it the Champions League final, but it absolutely is, right? It's bang on. That's exactly what it is. And it feels like in a quarter of so much uncertainty, right? We had the Magnificent Seven. It feels like this could give that sort of green light, I think, particularly to Nvidia bulls, to the tech bulls, to sort of say, okay, we were right to sort of be bullish despite everything that was going on. And I think that this sort of AI boom, it has lots of players, right? But I think Nvidia is that one that's setting the pace, and that's why we look to it so much. I guess with everything that we've sort of gone through there, we've spoken about sort of movements after hours, we've spoken about sort of what we expect from it. Sam, how on earth are we going to trade it?
Yeah, it's going to be a tricky one. It's going to have eyes on it, isn't it? I mean, the first thing to say is you don't have to trade it, by the way, for anyone listening to this that's new to the market. There's no harm in saying, you know what, it's coming out just after 9 p.m. local, UK time, or just after the US market closes, depending where you are in the world, and you say, okay, let's wait and see what happens in 12 hours, in 18 hours. Let's wait and see what happens when the dust has settled, then we can actually maybe get a more clear understanding. For those that do want to get involved because of the results come higher or lower than expected, or the forward guidance is better or worse than expected, then you have the option to do that. Obviously on eToro, you've got the extended hours for Nvidia, which gives people that opportunity to get involved and trade it how they see. I think from a technical point of view, I mean, the way that I would look at this and the way that I would look at any stock, I don't get involved in the initial headline because you get the noise, don't you? I mean, you mentioned Palantir recently, how good report comes lower, and you see it many times, that initial volatility. You've got to take into account what's happened in the few days before. If you're on like a 2-week hot run, that's kind of the market pricing in a good report, and if it's good, then okay, well, buy the rumor, sell the fact. So I quite like to sit on my hands and just wait. So I've got a couple of levels marked up for Nvidia, one being $136. If we can get above that on a close, then I would feel happy to say, okay, Nvidia report was good, market sentiment is good, next stop all-time highs. If, however, we start to move a little bit lower and trade towards low 120s and below 122, albeit that'd be a decent sized move, we'd have had to have gone through the 100-day moving average, the 200-day moving average, and then some key support, and that would make me think, oh, you know what, that was a really bad report, and we're going to start moving lower for a while. Anything in between that ultimately is probably just a little bit of noise, and the report wasn't that good, wasn't that bad, and we just literally move on to the next risk event. So that's the way that I would be looking at it. Obviously, extended hours is there for people that do want to get involved, and you've seen what Josh, or listened to what Josh said about the options market. That 6% move, there's going to be potential for a decent size move. So you can see why people would be looking at it to trade it. But I think the main thing to say is you don't need to, and you can just wait and see, and then see the impact that it has on the market. But for those that will be going to bed before the Nvidia release, if it is wildly out of line and the market is considerably higher or lower, do expect to see a significant move in the Nasdaq or the S&P because of that, and then those other names as well. So it's a big one. I'm looking forward to it. Neja, would this be something that you'll be sort of looking out for live, or will you be reviewing this tomorrow?
Oh no, I will definitely wait for the report to come out. I always do. So I'm looking forward to this initial volatility, and you know what? I'm looking forward to see if retail's gonna jump in, if we see a correction or not, because we've been discussing a lot about that in previous episodes.
Yeah, and Josh, I mean, what time will it be for you? You'll be up, will you?
Yeah, I'm the man on the ground for eToro reporting on that one in the morning. So I think it's 6 a.m. potentially.
Oh,
I need to double check. The clocks change all the time, don't they? So I need to double check what time that is. So it's
yeah.
a bit of a killer, but it is that one that you have to, whatever. I don't often get up at 6 a.m., so it's not the end of
Well,
the
I
world.
was about to say you're now the hardest working man in eToro, but you just said you don't always do that. You should have lied, lie and deny, lie and deny. On that, we'll wrap it up there. But Neja, thank you very much for your service. We'll see you in a few months' time. But from Josh and I, thank you very much, and for everyone that's tuned in, thank you as well.
Thank you. I will miss you guys and hopefully see you soon.
Definitely.